Good evening, Mr. Thomas. Good evening. Good evening, Ms. Boyd.
Hi, Ms. Helton. Hi, Mr. Thomas. I haven't seen you in a while. It's nice to see you.
Good,
We're
good,
the early
good.
birds. We're the early birds.
Right, obviously.
What is it? Hmm?
Hey, Andrew, how are you?
Good afternoon. Hope you're enjoying this now.
Good.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Suki. We have a phone number signed in that doesn't have audio, the 917 number.
Okay, we'll get started in a couple of minutes. The person with the 917 number, you don't seem to have audio, so I think you won't be able to speak.
Yeah, it's no audio connected to that line for the 917 number. Whoever's calling in from the 917 number, you should sign out of the meeting and sign back in so that you can connect to audio if you would like to speak at any point during the meeting.
Okay, I think we'll get started. It's 7:08. So let me start by wishing everybody a happy Valentine's Day for tomorrow. And the rules of conduct, spread love. That's the Brooklyn way. So no hate speech, no personal attacks. We can argue furiously about the issues, but don't make it personal. When we have public comment, everybody will speak for 2 to 3 minutes, depending on how many people there are. Doesn't look like there are a lot of people, so people can speak for 3 minutes. It won't be a back and forth session. So if you want to speak during public comment, raise your hand at the start when I call for it, and we'll assign a speaker order. Everybody will get to speak for 3 minutes until the 20 minutes is up. That's basically it. Generally speaking, keep your comments to 3 minutes. For the person who just signed in, I was just explaining how the public comment session is going to work. When I call for public comment, you need to put up your hand right away. You can either raise your hand on camera, or you can use the raise hand function. The way that you do that is you click on reactions, and then there's a button for you to raise your hand like this. And then you can lower your hand when you're done. And I'm going to need you to raise your hand at that time, and then I'll create a speaker order. I'm not going to take speakers who raise their hands in the middle of the public comment session because this is not a back and forth discussion. Everybody who feels like they need to say something, say it. You have up to 3 minutes. And then we'll move on to the next speaker. That's basically it. Again, no hate speech, no personal attacks. Please keep it civilized. Everybody will be on mute until I call on you. Well, that's basically it. So let's start with, we'll start with the public comment session. Looks like everybody's pretty much here. Is there any member of the public or board members who are not committee members who wish to make a comment? Please raise your hands. You can do it virtually, or you can wave at the camera. Okay. I see Alicia Boyd and I see Lori Johnson. Is there anybody else? Calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times. Okay, Alicia will hear you first and Lori second.
Has anyone sat here and had a discussion about this new format that Suki has now decided that only the community can speak at the beginning of this meeting about a topic that they haven't even discussed yet? I mean, now you're imposing this new structure onto this committee that has never been here before. And you are now saying that we can't talk to each other. We can only now speak at the beginning of the meeting. And what about what's happening during the meeting? There's going to be discussions during the meeting. Topics are going to be discussed. Are you now saying that the community cannot have a conversation? That we cannot sit there and talk to each other? I mean, it's one thing to sit there and have someone do very negative hate comments. That's one thing. Stop it. Don't allow it to happen. Don't say it's okay. But now you're sitting there basically saying that the community can't have a voice in this committee, that we are now restricted just making a comment at the beginning of the meeting about what I don't know. We haven't seen the contents of what is being discussed. And we have the right to interject. This is not a community board meeting, a general board meeting. This is a committee meeting where you're supposed to be hearing from the public as well as everyone else on topics. And this format has not been discussed by this committee. How are you now imposing this format upon the committee without having a discussion with the committee of this is how they want the committee to be run? And I also noticed, Suki, that when you go to other committee meetings, you don't adhere to that. You don't recognize the chair, you interject. So now you're doing this to us here, but you don't even follow your own rules and regulations when you go to other committees. So I'm a little confused about what's happening here at this ULURP committee. The public should have the right to be able to speak on the topics that are discussed at the time that it's being discussed. So I asked the committee members to please interject and discuss this new format that Suki has decided all by herself.
Okay, thank you for your comment, Alicia. Your 3 minutes is up. By the way, the public will be able to participate in the general discussion section. Absolutely. That's not the point of this. The point is simply to allow members of the public to bring concerns that we might not be aware of. The next speaker is Lori Johnson. Lori?
Okay, good evening, everyone. Forgive me, I'm walking down the street trying to head for home. So if you hear cars and see darkness and a street light, that's me. So Rutland Road between Rogers and Nostrand is being cut up. People are selling their homes to developers, even though they have been asked to reach out if they're having problems paying for their home, if they want to sell their home. And it seems as though there's nothing to stop them. Suki, you and I, Lori Henning,
We lost you, Lori. Lori, we lost you. We can't hear your audio anymore. Lori, we can't hear your audio anymore.
Hold on.
That's better.
Hear me now?
Yes.
So we were trying to develop a group to try and fight what's going on in the whole neighborhood. It's not just Rutland Road. It's not just, Midwood. And you seem to decide you were not going to participate. And there was never an answer why. And so, the direction it went, I'm not blaming totally you, but as I told my block, I can't do it by myself. It takes a team. I can follow. I don't have to lead, but we needed help, Suki. And, you kind of like disappeared. So to send me an email and tell me, what's going on your block and you know what they're doing. I mean, yes, I know what they're doing. And at one point you were involved, then you weren't. No reason, no nothing. And now you're having a meeting. I am here. And as you can see, I'm walking down the street and I'm available as far as this, but yeah, we need to be consistent. It can't be, you just duck out and now you're like, what are we doing? So that's it. I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment, Lori. Okay, so we'll move now to the committee member updates section. Do any committee members have any updates they wish to share? You want to raise your hand, anybody? Okay, so I'll start with an update on our City of Yes subcommittee on City of Yes for housing opportunity. This is again a citywide text amendment that is being proposed and it will start to go through the review process this spring in mid-April. It will enter the public review process. So from that point, we'll have 60 days for public comment. After that, it will go to the city council. This is part of a really major zoning code overhaul. It began with zoning for zero carbon. It moved on to economic opportunity for commercial zoning, and it's now housing. So, in answer to your question, Lori, this is part of what we've been doing. It's extremely time intensive. It's been thousands of pages of zoning code changes, all of which will affect our neighborhood. I think, much of it we feel negatively. It certainly is is designed to increase the amount of development in our community over and above what is already happening. And so that is part of what we are trying to address here at this committee. So we talked about what the City of Yes housing changes are going to bring. It is, as I said, going to increase the amount of permitted development in every part of the community, including those parts of the community that are already seeing very significant amounts of development. For example, on the R6 blocks, such as Rutland between Rogers and Nostrand, or Midwood between Rogers and Nostrand, they would see a 60% increase in the amount of permitted development. Other blocks would see maybe about a 30%, 40% increase. Some of the lower density districts would also see a significant amount of increase. And so, yeah, overall, the lower density districts would also see decreases in the minimum lot size, which would affect the largest lots. So we basically talked about the higher density districts. These density increases are in exchange for affordable housing. That was initially it was what was talked about was the level of affordability would be $100,000 a year for a family of three. The Department of City Planning is now saying it would be at 80% or lower of area median income. That translates to about $80,000 for a family of three. They haven't said exactly what the level would be, but they're promising it would be somewhere below 80% of area median income. And just for reference, our district's area median income as of 2022, the American Community Survey, is $77,000 per household. So this is not low income for our district. It's about median income, meaning that apartments at that level are essentially market rate. So what else did we talk about? We talked about parking. They're intending to eliminate the mandate to provide parking spaces for new development. And that, was something that people were very concerned about. Everybody felt that we needed more parking. A lot of people were concerned about new development already. Rod mentioned like a huge site in his area that could potentially be developed. A lot of blocks, Lori, are facing the same thing where, smaller houses are being demolished and built up. So this is really a district-wide issue, and the city of Yes is definitely going to intensify these pressures. With respect to other updates, City of Yes for Economic Opportunity had a hearing at the City Planning Commission. The City Planning Commission has not voted yet, and I have not seen a date when they're going to vote yet. Mia, have you seen a date?
Not as of yet.
Yeah, so after the City Planning Commission vote, it would then go to the City Council for a vote. So we don't yet know when that will happen. So far, it seems like the community boards are somewhat divided as to whether they approve or disapprove. As you know, we disapproved, as did many other community boards. Others have given conditional yes approval. The Green Fast Track Amendment, which we discussed last time, that is actually not a ULURP process. That is a rule change. So it is not voted on by the City Council, but it is voted on by the City Planning Commission. The City Planning Commission had their hearing on February 27th. On February 7th, a lot of people from District 9 came out and testified. So thank you all for doing that. And the City Planning Commission is expected to vote, I think, on the 22nd, but written comments will be accepted up until February 17th. So that's it from my side. Does anybody else have any updates they want to offer about things that are going on in or around the district? Have we heard from the council members, Councilmember Hudson, Councilmember Joseph? John? John, do you have any updates?
Yes, sorry, I was struggling with the unmute, whatever, layering.
I have to unmute you.
Okay, yeah. I don't really have an update, but I would like to comment on the way you characterize the floor area increase. The majority of our community board is R6 and R7, that medium density district that you were referring to, and the UAP program, the universal affordability preference is really taking the amount of floor area that you can build and using the current AIRs, affordable independent for residences, affordable independent residences for seniors, that floor area, and using that floor area as the max permitted for the UAP program. So what city planning has really done here is they've taken the current density that is permitted for that very specific housing typology, affordable independent residences for seniors, and brought the UAP program to meet that. So I think what they're doing here, and I'm reading between the lines, is that they're taking that current density and they are just allowing it to occur for more housing types. There is an increase for R6B. We have very little R6B in our district, of 0.2 FAR up to the beyond the AIRS FAR. So there is that increase, but that's very the effect on our district is de minimis for that R6B district. The majority of it is really just coming up to that AIRS FAR. So I don't think it's accurate to characterize this as a significant increase in floor area or density. It's really just a shift away from AIRS to more types of housing. So that's my take on this.
Okay, thank you. So John is right that there was a program called Affordable Independent Residences for Seniors, otherwise known as ZQA, or part of ZQA, Zoning for Quality and Affordability, which passed in 2015. However, that program is actually no longer permitted because there was a lawsuit, a fair housing lawsuit, that stopped it, saying that it wasn't, it was discriminatory to only have this type of affordable housing for seniors. So that is actually no longer permitted. The UAP program is a new program, is therefore a new program that would increase the zoning density from a 2.4 on an R6 narrow street, which is what streets like Rutland and Midwood are between Rogers and Nostrand. And it would increase that to a 3.9 density, which is similar to what you have right now in an R7 district. So that's what I mean by that. And the R7 districts would then go from a 3.44 to a 5.0, which is about a 30% increase there. The R8 districts, I think, is a little bit less. It would go from a 5.0 to a 6.0. So that's more like a 20% increase there. Did you still want to say something, John? Did you still want to say something?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the AIRS program was not found as not compliant with fair housing. I don't know where that's coming from. There is a fair housing issue that you can't mix AIRS with multifamily because then that's age discriminatory, but you can still do a fully AIRS building. There's nothing that doesn't permit that. So that's just factually not true. AIRS is permitted, so it's really a shift in the type of housing that's being permitted here and not a fair housing issue.
Okay. Well, that's something that we can certainly look into, but certainly those buildings, a few of them did happen in our district, and they stopped in July of 2021. That was so that definitely is something we can look into further. But as far as I know, after July of 2021, there were no more AIRS buildings in our district. Okay, so All right, so we'll now get to, if nobody else has any updates, we'll get to the next section, which is our housing land use roadmap. If you'll recall, I put this up in January. This was the last time that we talked about this. Okay. So we had a really good discussion, I think, about some aspects of this. Basically, what this is, right? We've had a lot of people come to us and say, well, why is this happening in my local area? Nobody who lives here wants this, right? And in general, yes, local preference about what we want to see built in our neighborhood is very important, but it is subject to the wider community needs. That's at the district level, the city level, the state level. It's also subject to fair share. We have principles of fair share. We have principles of suitability, right? What's the highest and best use of a particular piece of land? Then we have other laws that impact where something can go or what we can do with land use. There's constitutional laws, environmental laws, racial impact laws, the landmarks law, right? So we started talking more about local preferences in detail. This is just like what people were commenting. So city council member deference, there's been some debate about that. We talked about, the zoning resolution talks about the need for sufficient housing for present and expected future population. So we talked a little bit about what that means. I think there was a really good discussion about that, and I would, I'll send this out, and I would encourage you all to read the notes. There's different views on that based on what we think expected future population is going to be, how many units are permitted, what the vacancy rates are, what the vacancy rates are for housing at particular levels. And then there's a whole bunch of other factors that the zoning code mentions as well, right? We need sufficient commercial space. This is part of the discussion that took place under City of Yes for economic opportunity. We need to protect tax revenue. We need to have sufficient open space. We need to limit congestion by regulating the density and bulk of buildings, provide off-street parking, protect light, air, and privacy, protect property values, protect the city's economic base, protect public health and safety, protect residential areas and commercial centers from traffic congestion, limit heights in historic areas, encourage attractive and economical architecture, protect neighborhood character, promote stability in residential and commercial development, and provide for community facilities in residential areas. So there are many, many things that the zoning code directs us to try and look at. And these are sort of high level principles. And if you want to pick a couple of them and talk about how the zoning actually tries to implement them, we can do that. We can also talk about fair share. There are specific laws regarding fair share. They're not strict. We can talk, suitability is probably not the best thing to talk about. We can talk about the constitutional requirements on land use. We can talk about the landmarks law, racial impact law. I think I'm going to save that for another time. We can, I think that we should probably have a presentation on that. So what do people want to talk about first? John, and then Esteban, and then Alicia.
Actually, Alicia's had her hand up for a while, so I'm fine to let her go first. She's been very patient.
Okay, go ahead, Alicia.
First, I had my hand up to give new information, and you just completely ignored it as if you didn't see my hand up. So I don't understand why only the committee members are allowed to do updates and the community is not allowed to do that. You have a back and forth, and you don't allow anyone else to have a discussion about the issue that you're bringing up. And personally, I don't even know what this is. This sounds like a land use. What are you doing here in this community, in this committee? It seems to me as if you're deciding what we should be doing in this committee instead of addressing the issues that are being brought up. What is this? What is this? This is your plan, Suki, for us. This is now what we're supposed to do in this ULURP committee, is now focused on this plan that you have created for us without even talking to us about if this is what we want to do. What's going on here? I'm completely unaware of what's happening here. And I would like an answer to my question. What is this? And who created it? And why are we doing this without having community a part of this discussion?
Thank you for your comment, Alicia. John?
Thank you. I think actually, Suki, as the chair of this subcommittee, I think you've got the authority to run this meeting how you want to. So I have no issue with what you're doing and how you're proposing to run this and bringing up these topics. What I would like to point out is, and I think it might be further up on this list, and
Okay.
it's an update. It was the vacancy survey. There was a recent article in the Times that showed that the vacancy is now at 1.4%. So this problem of not having enough housing supply is not going away. And I know there's a lot in the housing opportunity city of yes thing for everyone on this call to not like, but I think it's clear that we cannot continue to be doing things how we're doing them now, or this problem is just going to get worse. More people are not going to be able to afford the city. They're going to move out. It's going to become a place where families can't, come and raise their family. It's not sustainable. We have to be part of a solution, and saying no to everything is not the right way to do that.
Okay. I mean, point taken. Yeah. Esteban?
Can you all hear me? Yep. All right, good. The vacancy is down to 1.4%, which is not terrible news for rent stabilized tenants, at least, because we don't pass the 5% threshold. But there's a lot of procedural issues with the vacancy survey and what they count as vacant. And I'm not going to go through those right now, but it's not really as bad as it sounds, because a lot of units are taken off of that and not considered. And then in terms of heirs, it was a fair housing issue. I just want to bring that up. It was the fact that seniors were being given preference over other potential tenants that wanted to move into a high opportunity area. It wasn't a lawsuit, but HPD came up with that decision. They presented it to NICEF and the affordable housing developers, and you can find it pretty easily with a Google search I just did. So just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Oops, sorry, I stopped sharing. Okay, so yeah, the one thing I just wanted to point out with the vacancy rate, I do wonder if they might have changed the way that they're counting vacancy between the last survey and this one, because actually, according to the census numbers, the city's population has continued to decline. It declined by another 100,000 over the past year. So we're down from 8.8 million in the 2020 census to 8.335 million in the latest census estimates. So, you know, I just wonder if the way that is being counted has changed. But yeah, it definitely sounds like a tight market. Let me see, did anybody else have their hand up? Okay, so do we want to continue to is the issue of sufficient housing something that we want to continue to talk about, or do we want to talk about any of these other subjects? I mean, okay, so one more thing I wanted to mention actually. You know, I think maybe the discussion about sufficient housing should not just be limited to the number of housing units that we have or that we produce. Maybe it's also the size of housing units, the type of housing units, how we live. You know, it's been raised as an issue in this district before that there are people who would like to expand their houses, their single family houses. And, you know, these are one single unit, but people have large families. They might need to expand their houses. Sometimes there's a crowding issue. So I don't know if there's anyone who, you know, wants to speak to that issue with respect to CB9. You know, as I said, it's something that has been raised in the past. But I just wanted to point out that that's an aspect of sufficient housing as well. Okay, I'm going to see. All right. Rod, John, and then Esteban.
Okay, am I unmuted? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hey, good evening, everyone. Okay, I just wanted to follow up on something that John was stating. You know, I agree with him that the city, if the way we're going, things will be unaffordable as people move out and so forth. And I understand that. But my main concern is the overcrowding within CB9. Right? And that is what my contention is. And when you take a look at audits and construction permits, and where I was doing a little, little research on construction permits and where they are. There are a number of construction permits within CB9, right? And if we could put some sort of a moratorium on it, if it's legal, I would love it. Right? They need to spread the wealth throughout the entire borough. And that is not what is being done, right? The land here, maybe because it's cheaper, or, it's by subways, whatever the case may be, it has to be spread out. And we are just oversaturated the way things are going. And I've walked down Rutland Road, Nostrand and Rogers, and yes, I see what's happening there. And that's one of the things that we should see if we can control that or make some sort of suggestion, build out. We're just too crowded. And combined with the slow police response from the 71st precinct, which is the slowest in all of Brooklyn, it's a problem. So it's just going to pile on and pile on. That's my biggest concern.
Yeah. Thank you for your comment. Okay, Esteban. Oh, wait, did I call John first? I'm sorry. Okay, well, John doesn't have his hand up anymore. So Esteban?
Yeah, I was just gonna bring up one thing that we're dealing with pretty consistently in within the Crown Heights Tenant Union, and it's somehow exploded significantly in the past couple of months. Is there's only two loopholes left for deregulation of apartments, which is substantial rehabilitation um, and demolition. And there's this sudden surge of substantial rehabilitation claims, which essentially makes those rent stabilized apartments um, not stabilized anymore. And people can get just evicted from those. And we had passed a law just this past session that would have fixed that problem, but the governor made chapter amendments to where that's not the case anymore. So it still stands. The substantial rehabilitation will still be a potential thing. I don't know what we can do about it necessarily, other than a lot of this is technical stuff having to do with when it was rehabilitated, what percentage of the building, what kind of renovations were done. But it is something to watch out for because again, like we say that rent stabilized tenants have protections, but there are some very specific instances where they don't. And those like there was a 285 Schenectady, for example, they went and found a substantial rehab done in the 70s and deregulated the entire building as a result of that. A building that they'd already been in litigation with for like 5 years to determine a preferential rent issue. So it's and that was the first time that we saw that. And now I've talked to at least probably tenants from like 5 different buildings in the last week that are dealing with this specific issue. So just something to watch out for.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe the affordability issues are going to impact us more than we thought. John and then Alicia.
Thank you. Starting to get the hang of this this unmuting system. So, Rod, you mentioned saturation, and I think actually one of the things that the UAP program, the Universal Affordability Preference, has going for it is that it is a citywide system that would basically have every neighborhood do a little bit. And this is, I'm going to sound like I'm hitting the play button on what city planning how they've been portraying this, but that is what this program will do. It'll allow every community to add capacity and I think really make it so that we don't have to have these like gigantic towers that are making up for shortfalls everywhere else. So there was actually another article in the Times a couple weeks ago about how could we possibly do 500,000 units, and it was actually really surprising. It was a study done by a pretty well-known architecture firm, and they looked at the entire city, and it was actually the mid-rise, the like 6 to 8 stories, where over 300,000 units could actually be provided within the city to meet 60% of that goal. Some of it was high rise, some of it was low scale, but it was really surprising to me that the mid rise typology is where so much capacity could be unlocked. And Esteban, I'm not disagreeing with you that there was a fair housing issue with age restriction in the same building, but that doesn't mean that errors can't be done. Errors can still be done. I don't think you were saying that, but I'm not disagreeing with you that there's a fair housing issue there in a mixed age building. And I also think this is the topic that we should be talking about. Housing is the topic that we should be talking about in the subcommittee, whether it's housing types or affordability or density. I was at a town hall meeting a couple months ago that was hosted by Brian Cunningham, and it was about the vital projects. And I met somebody afterwards, and he was telling me about how his community doesn't really have access to a lot of the apartments that are being built. They need more bedrooms in the apartments. So I think that's an example of engagement and talking to developers and designers and expressing a preference so that's your specific concerns. Because I went right back to my developer client and I said, you know what, this is something I heard at this town hall meeting. Is this something we could do? And he was receptive to it. So I think engagement, I think Yakov has made this point before, is that engagement and being part of the process is better than not being part of the process. It's more productive. There, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Alicia? Alicia?
Yes, I am trying to unmute. Let's just all keep in perspective that we're talking to a developer. A developer is now sitting on this land use committee. And so, of course, the developer who makes money off of development would propose the idea to have more development in our community, not caring that we are the densest, you know, and that whole idea that, oh my God, it's just a little bit everywhere. No, it's a little bit everywhere. That means it's here as well. It doesn't look at a community and say, well, you've done a lot of development here. You're incentivizing developers to come into the community and build more than what they can currently. Also, just for some facts here, it was a lawsuit regarding selecting a particular group and saying only that group can have apartments. That lawsuit was settled a couple of weeks ago, in which the city has agreed that it was a violation of federal law for you to be able to do that. And so that type of violation of the law has now been settled. You cannot do that. You cannot now take a particular group and say that group is the only group that will be able to have access to those apartments. It's called segregation. So that is, also there was a new, just a lawsuit that just was filed that was determined by the appeals court. And this is important because the appeals court is the highest court in the land in New York City. And basically, there were two provisions under the rent stabilization laws in order for you to remove tenants out of the building and demolish the building and thus get rid of those rent stabilized apartments. One was that you had to sit there and state that you were going to destroy the building to rebuild it. And two, you had to prove financially that you could do that. Well, the highest court in the land made a determination that you didn't have to have that second part. This is a major, major defeat for rent stabilization tenants, because now all the landlord has to do is say, we plan on destroying this building because we now have all this additional FAR, right? That we now can capitalize on this additional FAR that we're trying to get from the city of Yes, destroy the building, and then sell it to a developer to do something else with it. They don't have to prove that they actually have the fight for the rent stabilization that's in our community, especially because so many of our rent stabilized tenants exist in very small buildings. They're normally 6 to 10 apartments in these buildings. Once you incentivize landlords with the additional, just a little bit, and a little bit can be that much more, to destroy and rebuild, that's all the landlord has to say. I plan on destroying and rebuilding this building because I only have 6 apartments and now I can have 15 apartments. Well, guess what? All of those tenants get removed. They get thrown out. And then this new building comes under this so-called, not really sure, 80% of AMI or less. Nothing is put in stone. Nothing is in writing. I don't believe in any way that this additional FAR is going to be connected to 80% or less. This is what the Department of City Planning is saying. This is what developers are saying. But what does the law say? What does the text amendment say? We don't have that yet. They are not in writing. And I assure you that when it is in writing, it will not be 80%. it would be something like, we'll try to make it, or it's between 80 and 150, some way to, some loophole to get developers out. And finally, as far as the vacancy rate is concerned, and that 1%, the 1% is for the low apartments. That vacancy rate does not apply, and you need to distinguish the two between what is low moderate vacancy, which is at 1%, and the luxury developments that are going up all over the city, which have high vacancy rates. I mean, we're talking about downtown has 30% vacancy rates. I mean, there's no emergency when it comes to market rate housing in New York City. We have the housing. It's the low moderate income apartments that we don't have. And we have not seen a program that actually says that we're going to be targeting that particular population and only that population when we give you all this additional space to destroy and rebuild and remove rent stabilized tenants out of our community.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yakov?
Thank you, Suki. Thank you all. I want to comment on what John said, but I just want to briefly, you started off this meeting by asking us all to abide by the rules, which I think was a good thing. I think that should apply to everybody. You were attacked tonight. John was attacked. I mean, as if, I know he's not a developer, but as if being a developer is something bad and people have other motives. It's simply unfair that we should be doing any personal attacks, and we should all try to be respectful, because we come to these meetings, and I'll tell you, it's incredibly frustrating to hear these attacks. And I'm not interested in this. We're not interested. We want to get things done. We want to have conversations. We want to stay focused. We want to stay respectful. So I ask that we all respect the rules. We don't attack anybody. And I actually appreciate John on this committee. I think he has a lot of knowledge. And I think we need a diverse committee. It's very important that we have diversity and all perspectives are represented. Regarding to what he mentioned about apartments, I think it's a really big challenge, because at least in my limited understanding and interactions with any properties that are going up, when it comes down to bottom line, it's almost never worth it to build an apartment where a family of, let's say, more than 3 or 4 children could live in. Just financially not worth it for the person building it. And very rarely are there apartments that are built where larger families could move into. It just, especially now with the way the laws are written, with affordability and everything, for whatever reason, it's incredibly difficult. We're seeing a lot of larger families. You have families of 8 living in a 2-bedroom apartment, or families of 6, and it's incredibly difficult. And I think this is something that really that the state lawmakers have to look into, because we want to keep, we don't want to gentrify any neighborhood. And there are neighborhoods that have large families. And essentially, some of the older buildings had larger apartments, and all the new ones are smaller apartments with less rooms. And maybe you could address why this is, why financially it's just not worth it for people to build buildings with more rooms. But I think every community has larger families. It's not just the Jewish community. And I think a lot of minority communities would benefit from having more than 2-bedroom apartments available for affordable pricing. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Jakob, for your comment. Esteban?
Yeah, I wanted to add to something that Alicia mentioned, and that's something that we need to discuss, is that there was a lawsuit that was settled within the past 2 or 3 weeks that gets rid of the local option in terms of the percentage of units that are going to go to somebody within CB9 when a new building goes up. That's no longer a thing. So the lottery is going to be open to everyone across the city. This lawsuit was in motion for 5 or 6 years, but that means that there's not going to be that chunk of apartments that go to people that already live in CB9. That's no longer going to be a thing. And that was one of the big things that at least politicians were using to convince communities to accept new housing. And so I think it's something that we need to discuss. Um, and then I think that was it. Yeah, I think there was something more, but oh yeah, and Yakov, there's been some lawsuits that have been brought within the past 10 years having to do with unit size. So it's a pretty active issue that happens. A lot of Latino families also have this issue because they have larger families, and so there's like some fair housing lawsuits saying that they're just actually discriminating against certain groups of people by not building enough units in certain housing, at least the way that it is, like we have rent stabilized units that have 5 bedrooms here, so it's possible to do. And then as far as city planning and the percentages that they're talking about AMI, I've been following the Atlantic Avenue rezoning and going to all of those meetings, and was pretty engaged in that process for the past 2 years. And they just straight up lied. I mean, they just straight up lied 100%. They said, we hear you. This is what our framework. And then they come out with the framework for the zoning, and it's absolutely not at all what we had talked about. And so I have no confidence in city planning actually telling the truth about the percentages that they're going to give. I think it's going to take a significant amount of lobbying and pushing from communities to get those numbers down. But as it is, like the contrast between what they said they were going to do and what they've ended up doing as a at least as a draft right now is mind-boggling. It's significant. It's not like a small thing. So yeah, I don't put any trust in city planning's ability to tell the truth until after something gets passed. So
Yeah, thanks. Okay, John and then Alicia.
So yeah, the community preference thing was resolved a couple of weeks ago, and I think what it does is actually ratchets down the percentage for a community. I forget the percentage, but it takes it down by like half, and I think it's actually going to phase out over a period of time. So yeah, that's a big deal. I think it has, depending on whether it's a wealthier neighborhood or a lower income neighborhood, it has different effects. So that's a big thing. Yakov, thank you for recognizing that I do bring some value to this. I think I need to get a shirt that says I'm an architect, not a developer. Maybe that will make things clear. And I think the dynamic with 4 bedrooms is, HPD's programs, the local housing agency, doesn't really have a program for anything bigger than a 3-bedroom. They don't have anything that subsidizes that sort of construction. I do have a developer client, Phipps Houses. They're one of the largest not-for-profits, affordable development providers in the city. There's some projects in the Bronx where we're doing some 4 bedrooms, but that's a real anomaly. And I think it's once you start doing a project, when you try to fit those 4 bedrooms in, it really makes the financials of the project really difficult, just because they're bigger units. I would like to make a suggestion to this group about how a way that we could calibrate the UAP program. I think if it's, if they promise 80% and they come through on 80%, I think that's too coarse. It's too coarse of a measure. Every neighborhood, every community is different. Every neighborhood and community has different average income rates, and to pin it to an AMI that is all of the city, Westchester, Long Island, it makes no sense. I think what would make sense is to calibrate it to each neighborhood and have it be based upon some sort of census data that's drilled down and specific to each neighborhood. So I think that would be a way that we could engage on the city of housing opportunity and recommend the UAP program be calibrated to each community and not be this kind of blanket 80% that will fit some and not fit others.
Thank you for your comment. Alicia? Alicia?
Let me just clarify a few things so we understand. The City of Yes is proposing to do away with even the mandated required amount of units. They want to, right now, outside of Manhattan, they have to have 680 square feet of every apartment. And they also have to have a percentage of certain amount of apartments that have to be at least 3 bedrooms. The City of Yes wants to do away with that requirement and then allow them to be able to build the type of housing that they feel like they want to build, which is small, 1 family, 1 bedroom to studios and 1 bedrooms mainly, with possibly 1 or 2 bedrooms. They're trying to eliminate the 3 bedroom requirement. So if we're looking at the City of Yes to solve this problem about larger apartments, that is going in the opposite direction. And again, once the text amendments are here and they have been written and we get a chance to analyze that, we will show you that they plan on moving even more of the required size, larger sizes. The second thing is, if we want to talk about housing, there's a housing committee. If this is a zoning, this is a land use, this is not a housing. If you want to talk about the housing situation and the vacancy rates and stuff, then take that up with the housing. Why are we a land use committee looking at housing issues when we have a housing committee? So that should be, really, that conversation should be happening there. And the reason why they don't sit there and look at the AMI of individual communities, and even though there have been, even our local congresswoman has proposed legislation that would allow that to happen. Like, in order for you to get funding, you would have to look at the local AMI. That was completely removed because the federal government's programs, and these programs are based upon the AMI that the federal government creates. And those AMIs are the ones that are applied. So we could talk all we want about local AMI, but if you're talking about getting funding, especially from the federal government and other subsidized programs, they're not going to look at community-based AMIs. And so the fact that we're having a conversation about, oh, let's kind of have community-based AMIs is just a ploy to act like we're doing something, when in reality, if you're not going to be able to get subsidized, and you know the developers need to be subsidized for their affordable housing, it's not going to work, because the federal government is the standard that they're going to use. And this was the reason why, according to our congresswoman, that her bill did not get pushed forward, because the federal government would not support it. So let's stop with the idea that, oh, whether the city council decides to implement something based upon their funding sources, that's something different. But I don't think that zoning is going to be able to correct that issue. These are federal and city and state laws that have to be changed, and it's not going to happen through the zoning resolution. And so we should not be thinking, oh, we need to sit down and negotiate with the Department of City Planning and put in that we want to have local AMI, when we know that they're automatically going to reject that because of the way in which funding is given to developers based upon the AMI.
So
and
actually,
well, this is the rationale that our congresswoman gave us when her bill failed to get any traction that would have required local AMI. And this is also, whether or not that excuse is valid, well, you would have to take it up with her. But this is what we've been told in regards to that issue.
that's good to know. Thank you, Alicia. So I'll just make a comment here and then I'll recognize John. During the information session on City of Yes for housing opportunity, they were talking about income averaging for the AMIs. So it would, like, assuming they came in with an AMI of 80%, it would allow for some units below 80% of AMI, but also units above 80% of AMI, and they didn't say how much above. So that's something to know. So regarding, why are we having this discussion about things like vacancy rates and, how much housing is needed and so on? The reason is because the zoning code directs us to provide sufficient housing for present and expected future population. So what is actually sufficient? Obviously, we need to look at demographic projections. We need to look at how many housing units we have, how much is in the pipeline, how many we may need based on future population, and what the vacancy rate is. The population is really the driver for all types of planning, whether we, are looking at what we need in terms of sewers, electric, transportation systems, schools, daycare, et cetera, et cetera. It's all based on population as well as the number of units of housing, which is kind of indirectly tied to population. So to Rod's point, actually, that he was saying, that he feels that CB9 has built enough and that this should be kind of spread around fairly. So I looked at the permit data for CB9 as well as citywide, and I think we have something like 2,900 fully permitted units, as well as 3,500 that we've built in the past 10 years. Citywide, there's 119,000 units permitted. And that's a number that's been confirmed by city planning. They put out a presentation in March of this year that said pretty much the same thing. So yeah, there is already a substantial amount in the pipeline. I would agree with that. I would also agree, and I think John has pointed this out as well, that there are districts that have built almost nothing in the past 10 years and currently have very little in the pipeline. And that's largely because of their zoning. Their zoning does not permit additional units of housing to be built. In terms of, John, you were saying, plans could be made to build mid-rise housing everywhere. Again, I think we've talked about this in the past a number of times already, but based on my analysis, the as of right potential that could be built in our district is like another 35,000, 40,000 units, because our zoning is so far above what is already built that things could be demolished and rebuilt. And the UAP program, assuming it was fully taken up, would allow for an additional 25,000 units. So that's not a little bit of housing. That is, more than doubling the amount of housing units that we already have. We have about 42,000 housing units in the district now. So the as of right plus the UAP bonus would easily double that number. And that is not a small amount. Would it do the same in other districts? I'm not sure, but my guess is not as much, because many of these districts that have not built any housing at all in the last 10 years have a zoning envelope that's very close to what's already built. So if zoning is raised citywide, it will really be capacity for them will really be raised by maybe 20%, right? But for us, because our zoning is already very bad, it's going to trigger demolitions, right? For various reasons, like Esteban and Alicia were saying. And that's going to produce an enormous amount of new housing. So I think the impact is going to be very different on our district and much worse on our district than on districts where, you know, you think that this is the intended target because they haven't built any housing. I think those districts genuinely will build a little bit more housing under this type of a program, but our district would basically be leveled if it's not landmarked or if it's not in one of the R2 or R4 or R5 districts. So that's, you know, what I have to say about that. John?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I completely, well, I know I don't completely concur with your assessment that our neighborhood would get leveled, but that's a matter of opinion. I don't want to give up on this local AMI idea yet, and I think some, you know, interesting things have been raised. My suggestion is that the local income really be reflected in the HUD AMI. So it's not like you would do away with AMI and you would create a different system that's inconsistent with federal financing. You would just calibrate the local income to be more aligned with the AMI that would reflect the community. So that's all that I'm suggesting doing. And it wouldn't unravel all of the potential subsidy that could come through HPD through the federal HUD agency. So I still think it's a valid idea, but obviously it needs to be tested. And I knew about Yvette Clarke's bill that did not pass. So it's helpful to hear some of that insight on why it didn't pass. I think you're right, Alicia, to be suspect about the message that you get. Maybe it was a watered down version of it, but I'm not quite sure. And yeah, the one example of the like the Throgs Neck ULURP that I think passed a couple months ago is an example of where a community just came out against affordable senior housing, came out against a grocery store because it was really fear of I think, you know, misplaced fear. It was I think a really ugly example of how communities can resist things that I think would be helpful to the city on a larger basis. I want to point out that Tom Thomas has been raising his hand, so I think he wants to have something to say.
My apologies, I didn't see that. Tom?
Yeah, I think the John's comments on the economic profile neighborhood is well taken. I would like to add that every community has its own social and physical infrastructure profile as well. I'm particularly concerned about the transportation aspects, including what kind of trip generation each neighborhood has, dependency on mass transit or dependency on automobiles. And I'm thinking in particular about the city of Yes basically eliminating parking requirements for proposed structures. So it's not just the availability of space or the availability of unfilled zoning possibilities. And there are lots of other parameters which have been ignored.
That's a very good point, Tom. I think a lot of people agree with that. Alicia?
As far as unfounded fears when big real estate comes into the neighborhood and rezonings happen, we've seen the results of those unfounded fears that become very real when people get removed from their homes due to gentrification and displacement. We watched our Crown Heights neighbors in Crown Heights North get massively removed over the last decade as a result of their rezoning. And we've seen, you know, hundreds of people being removed, children. This is not unfounded fears, John. These are real concerns that people experience when big development comes in with the luxury high rises and, you know, and identifies a community as an open door. Like, now we got this community, we're going to be, you know, transforming it into a gentrified place. And we know this is what developers and their partners, such as architects, engage in. They engage in looking at communities and saying, what is the most viable community? Where can we make the most buck? And where can we transform this community into a more luxury community? And we watched that with Crown Heights North. So I think that there's a lot of fear that, and then the idea that we're going to allow all this massive amount of billable space to happen all over the city. And then somehow developers are no longer going to look at our community and then run to Staten Island or run to Queens to build doesn't even make any sense. We know developers look at potential sites based upon the amount of return they can get. We've seen a wave come from downtown, move up from Atlantic Avenue, move up to Crown Heights, try to move into Flatbush. And we know that that pressure is not going to decrease just because some developer has the option of building in Queens now or in Staten Island. The moment that we increase our FAR, the moment that we increase our billable space, the moment that we say, yes, you can build more in our neighborhood, that's exactly what's going to happen. They're going to build more in our neighborhood. They're going to, and yes, that slight increase of that, you know, that additional FAR will be the determining factor, because now all of a sudden you can destroy that building and rebuild and get more than 50% FAR in exchange for that. And so you're going to incentivize, this is an incentive to remove the existing population, which is still predominantly Black, out of the community. It's called gentrification. We've been dealing with that for the last decade in our neighborhoods. And this rezoning proposal will intensify that, because it will be the tenants who would be at most risk. And even now, rent stabilized tenants that will be at most risk. Once you sit there and increase the billable space in the neighborhood, giving developers and their partners, okay, the opportunity to come in and destroy and rebuild. That's why this program does not work, the City of Yes. And that's why we will definitely be saying no to it, or I know I will be pushing to say no to it, because it's not gonna, it's going to incentivize even more development. It's going to incentivize more destruction of our existing population. And it's going to incentivize displacement of the existing tenants. Now, I know some people in this committee don't mind the displacement of Black people out of their neighborhood. Definitely not. We do not want the population to be removed so that a more wealthier population and a wider population can come in and take over our neighborhoods. So the idea that only a little bit more is not so bad, in our case, it is bad.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. Okay. So I actually think maybe it's time to talk about fair share. A couple of people have brought this up already. You know, Rod kind of alluded to this, that, you know, we've done more than our fair share. You know, so there are actually things that address this. The city charter, section 203 of the city charter, addresses this. And the fair share criteria addresses not so much where housing goes as where city facilities goes. For example, homeless shelters. It's not like a kind of fixed thing that says we're going to have an even number in every community. But it does require reporting and disclosure in an annual citywide statement of needs and a map of existing city-owned facilities. I think the controller released a report recently, an audit, that this wasn't necessarily being followed by the city in every case. There's something else that the city council passed recently called Intro 1031A, which is the New York City Fair Housing Framework. This would require HPD and DCP to create a citywide fair housing and assessment and plan every 5 years. It would assess long-term citywide housing needs. This is what we're talking about. Set 5-year housing production targets for each local community district and create a strategic equity framework reporting on obstacles and strategies for achieving them. So this sounds kind of like what, Rod was talking about in terms of spreading the housing and the housing production around. But it's not set to kick in until 2025, which I'm not sure why that is. But so does anyone have any comments they want to make about those two things? Oh, and by the way, I'll also say that, on the first one, the Section 203 fair share, several years ago, I think Crown Heights did try suing under this section to prevent a homeless shelter that was being built on Rogers. They knocked down like a block-wide church and put up a homeless shelter for women and children. And they tried suing, and they weren't really able to I'm not sure if they ended up dropping the lawsuit or if it was dismissed or whatever, but these are not easy lawsuits to bring because it doesn't per se say that if your community has more than, the average number of beds, that it's not allowed, right? It's more of a disclosure, it's more of a disclosure thing. And, you can see that the way in which this is worded, the criteria shall be designed to further the fair distribution among communities of burdens and benefits consistent with community needs. It's reasonable, but it's not fixed. It's not giving fixed numbers. So they ultimately weren't able to pursue that lawsuit. Does anyone have anything they want to comment on these two things? If anybody knows about other fair share rules or laws that they want to add to this discussion. Anybody at all? Anybody want to react to this? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I see hands. I didn't even see the hands on the other side. Okay, Rod. And then Esteban and then Alicia.
Okay, so just to make this comment with regards to the fair share audit, right? Just getting back to that. So one thing that I've noticed is that there are many, many audits that are performed within the city, and they locate findings, identify findings, and then they come up with recommendations in order to close the gaps that were found. The city does not do a great job of following up on those those findings or recommendations. They just don't. And the most recent example of that is the NYCHA concern that's going around here, the indictments. All right. There was an audit. Right? There's also an audit for the DEP where findings were found and they did not act on those. Right? So the thing is that we have to make sure that the city acts on these audit recommendations, especially for the fair share with housing, and also that falls into land use as well. Right. So, we put a motion together in the environmental committee meeting in order to find out where the DEP stands with the 2020 audit and the findings that were identified and the recommendations. Right. And I feel that, I have to read this audit again because I don't remember it, with this fair share audit. Something similar should happen here in order to find out, were those recommendations ever implemented? Because if the mindset is that, hey, this happened, we know we weren't utilizing the land properly, for the proper reasons in order to comply with the Fair Share Act and laws and rules and regulations, and it's all for naught. So I have to review this again, but I plan to attend the next housing meeting, and I'm going to bring this up.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And if housing, wants to ask for an assessment of, where these shelters are, or, how many beds we have, like a district map, I would certainly support that. Esteban.
Just for a little bit of history, and since you mentioned the Rogers shelter and the fact that they weren't able to file a successful lawsuit, that development, and I know this because I've been on this committee for 8 years, that development was used as a way to scare folks on this committee to have a sort of neighborhood-wide rezoning, which then, like, we spent a ton of time trying to, and they knew the whole time, this is the thing, they knew the whole time that it was going to be a shelter, that it wasn't just going to be luxury housing. They did that, and then a block away gave away land to a developer to build the Armory, which could have been fully affordable housing, could have easily housed all those people that had permanent apartments in this other. And so, like, these city agencies are coordinating these things, like they're working together, and we have to be really, really conscious of the fact that these things have happened already, what the history is within our district, and understand that these things are not rare. You know what I mean? Like that, to give away 100% publicly owned land that could have been permanent housing for those folks is unconscionable, and they did it anyway. And there it stands as a thing now. We have both a shelter and the Armory, and it's a good number of those apartments are not affordable to people in the neighborhood. So again, I know I'm harping a lot on city planning and on various administrations doing these things, but we have to approach these issues with the knowledge of what's happened already, and understand that, like, it's not just like a fluke when they lie.
Yeah. Definitely, we see that very often. What happens when a shelter is announced, the community opposes it. And then the next step is they say, but we should support permanent affordable housing here. And that is used to justify a rezoning. Alicia.
I think one of the examples is the Vital Brooklyn, the way you're saturating that particular community with all these types of social services within a specific geographical area. You know, this law was supposed to prevent that kind of thing from happening. This law was supposed to say, if you have services that you have to give to a community, those services cannot be saturated in one particular community, because we know for the most part, it is the communities of color that tend to have those saturated services. The problem is twofold. One, the courts do not support this law and do not interpret this law as actually doing something. Their interpretation is the disclosure law. Well, we told you that the shelter was coming. So we did our due diligence. And the courts are not saying, no, you're violating the spirit of the law, which basically says is that other community, you can't saturate a community with these things. And two, we're talking about the political will of communities. Some communities like Park Slopes, one shelter, you know, in the entire district, one shelter. That's because the political might of that community basically saying, not here. We're not having shelters here. And we watched it happen in Queens, where a shelter was being planned. The city council person, even before it got on the docks, was organizing the community against the shelter, and the shelter did not happen. The developers pulled back and said, no, in our communities, our elected officials don't notify us when shelters are coming in. They wait until it's a done deal. Then they announce it to us and talk about, oh, there's nothing that we can do. And so that keeps us continuously disempowered. And the Vital Book is exactly that. It is a concentration of services in a very small geographical area that should not happen. And yet it's happening right now underneath us. And so what do? You have the law is not effective. So what is this committee supposed to be doing now? You're supposed to be waging a political war with your elected officials. I mean, you know, so you know we are vulnerable. You know communities of color are vulnerable to this. And so the question is, what is zoning now have to do with that? That's my question. What does zoning have to do?
Okay, thank you for your comment, Alicia. Okay, I forgot what I wanted to say. Okay, so it's 8:37. We need to talk about the community fair and any events that we want to do. If we have any requests, we need to put in a budget request this month. Oh, John, did you have anything you wanted to add? Quickly?
I just wanted to say on the community fair topic, I do have a water feature that I could bring and set up. It's usually weather dependent. I mean, if it's a nice day, I can bring it out. Usually the kids have a great time in it. I do need a source of water, so I can offer that to be part of the fair.
Okay, I mean, we can ask. It's not usually like a block party. It's usually like people at tables distributing information.
Okay, that doesn't work then. Okay.
Yeah, but thank you for the offer. Okay, so you know, last year, or actually a couple of years ago when I did this, most of the committees had a table out, and they were handing out information about their committees, about their, you know, the issues that they deal with. City agencies come. Actually, Nicholas, since you're here, do you want to just talk about that? Nicholas?
Can you hear me now? I was muted.
Yes, I can.
Okay. Yes, this is this will be the third year for the resource fair. That was originally the idea to bring out CB9 to the community. So each committee had a table and they were telling what they do in their committees along with the city agencies and nonprofit organization in the community. We wanted to be a place where we get as much as the community possible. They were part of the original idea are not yet accomplished. Way to attract a lot of the young people with musical performance and all the stuff. Hopefully, this year we'll do that. Our committee, I chair the Park Recreation and Culture Committee. We already has passed a resolution with respect to the fair. A suggestion to have it on the street between on Carroll Street between Rogers and North Fund, right along Medgar and the high school there. So hopefully the whole community will accept that instead of going to the park, where we could really, if we plan it right, we could have all the same thing we had in the park, all the different part between artists selling the arts and crafts and so on and so forth, and all the information. But we think that being close to Northern Avenue, we're going to get a lot more people in the community to come in because there's a lot of foot traffic over there that we have not been getting at the park, because last year we didn't get as much as a turnout as we expected. That's the extent of my intervention. So we're asking all the community to think of some activity to do and bring it in for this particular day. And we're hoping to have it the first weekend of June.
Okay, can you sort of like tell us like what kinds of things committees have been doing in the past, just so people get a sense of you know, what works, what's.
I am only using, okay. Now, like for example, our last meeting, we probably will have a section where we're going to be doing some physical activity that would involve skating and aerobics. Each committee is still working on what they're going to do, but last year the youth and committee did most of the work in there. So hopefully by the end of the month, or by next month, we will know what each committee does. I don't know exactly what is everybody's planning. I can only talk about what we're thinking so far into the Park Recreation and Culture Committee.
Okay, thanks. Nicola?
Hi, I'm confused. I'm trying to understand. Is this supposed to be a resource fair, or is this a fun fair, like a block party, getting back to what John was talking about, where we are coming up with a way to entertain and engage the community that way? I'm a little confused as the purpose of this event. And is this going to be a regular block party permit, or is this what's the other permit that needs more time because it's more of a resource type of event? And Mia may know that, or Felice. I know Sapo has, it's like it's a longer period of time if you have something that's going to require food trucks, or if you have vendors coming out with their banners, then that takes a longer period and more lead time to get the permit.
Yeah, I think I can jump in and give some info here, Nicola. So essentially it'll be similar to last year, where we have agencies tabling and disseminating information, but we also wanted to find ways to make it more interactive by doing some things like CPR modeling. I like wellness or fitness engagement with DOH, MH, and like, One Brooklyn Health and one of some of their health teams doing demonstrations about healthy eating while providing information about the services that they provide. So just more dynamic ways to engage the community while still having the resource information there. We're just trying to draw folks out in a more creative way and have more interactive experiences than just handing out pamphlets of paper.
Okay, thank you. So I would like for land use to have a table, at a minimum, you know, with like a paragraph about our committee and what we do. But as Mia said, can we come up with any creative ways to engage the public? And I know that the kinds of activities that I've seen around land use and engaging the public in land use. And I know, Esteban, you've been to some of these workshops as well. You know, you can have graphical information, pictures, you know, building blocks, things like that. We certainly can have maps. You know, what are people thinking? What do you think?
I think the map idea is actually a good idea, to give people a sense of what like, even if you just did something where you did the zoning for you did each quadrant of the district and gave an example of what the types of housing are here and what it means, or something that just gives like a basic overview for people who are just generally interested in just becoming interested in land use in the community.
I think that's a good idea. Like maybe create a giant poster board or something with a map.
Yeah, something that's digestible for people, that's not going to overwhelm them and, you know, and have them shy off.
Alicia? Alicia?
Yes, I just wanted to note that there was a resident who came in the beginning of this meeting and had some concerns about their block. And I wanted to find out if this committee was going to address those concerns because of the time constraints that we now find ourselves under.
Yeah, it's 8:45. If people want to stay for another 15 minutes, we can discuss that as new business, like how, you know, what steps they could take going forward. Esteban?
Yeah, I was gonna chime in also on the map thing. We've done that before for a couple of meetings, and it's really useful to you could have, like, for example, like a pin or something. You could have people put the pin down where they live and maybe explain what the zoning is around there. Of course, we did it with you know, we've done it with the idea that we want to engage people in you know, in fighting off bad development, and so we explained what could be built in that particular place and what they could be looking at. And so I think that's super useful and probably the best way to get people involved in getting folks to come to committee meetings. You have to make some sort of connection to their home, what they're dealing with, you know, to make it interesting to them. Because otherwise it's really boring. Zoning is not exciting. So I think, yeah, if we could do like a big map and maybe have some way for people to interact with it, and then just some general, you know, uh, information. Also, I wanted to ask if there's going to be a way for organizations operating in the district um, to table, or if that needs to happen just sort of unofficially. I know MTOP has done some handing out of flyers before at one of these, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember, Alicia. I think you did at least the previous couple of years. But it would be good to have that. There's a lot of really great organizations operating in the district, and we have our own opinions and and ideas about the things that go on in the district. And I think it would be good to share those in some way with the community.
Yeah. Yeah. Mia, what's the policy on that?
Yeah, once we nail down a date, the district office will generate a solicitation for participation for vendors, not-for-profits, for community partners. So it'll be probably in our constant contact, something that we'll blast out to the community and on our social media for interested parties to sign up to table.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Sure thing.
John?
So I have to agree with Esteban that zoning can be really boring. And I don't, yeah, it's going to be hard to make it an interactive and interesting thing, but I think, yeah, keying in to where someone lives and what the issues are related to them is a great idea. I see that Lori, at least she's still participating. I'm not sure if she's listening or not, but okay, maybe she is. I think it's either on Fenimore or Hawthorne along the block. At every one of the buildings, there is a sign that basically says, and it's not like, you know, if you're trying to buy my house, buzz off, but it basically says, you know, this is this district, this is it's got certain controls, and and you know, I think basically every house had this, and it sent a very I think a strong message that this is a community. We are a group of people who live here, and we're not interested in you coming and buying our houses. I know it seems like maybe it's superficial, maybe it's not enough, but I think that's something that could be done. That if there is strong community organization, then there could be these signs. And they weren't just like paper signs, they were like nicely made, either metal or cut plastic signs. So they looked professional, they looked, you know, serious, and it did send a message. So I don't know, that's something that could be done.
Okay, thanks for that suggestion. Nicola?
Hi, getting back to the fair, I agree with Esteban and others to say, trying to make something that's interactive. We have Zola available if we have connectivity and can, or Wi-Fi. We could have a kiosk where people can log in, put in their address or their block and see what the zoning is in that area. We have City of Yes that will be housing, it will be raging. We may be in final review and sign off approval for economic opportunity. So I think that those are areas that we need to make sure that the community is aware of, and we can use this as an opportunity to, again, make it make sense to them and provide some insights on this is what's happening on your block or in your part of the community. And again, these are some of the citywide changes that are taking place and things that you can do to make sure that your voice is being heard, meeting with your community representatives and other actions to make sure that they understand what's happening and that they have a voice in the process.
Yeah, I like the kiosk or the tablet idea as well. Rod?
Yeah, I just want to follow up with what John stated, his comment. He is absolutely right. You know, putting signage up there, alerting people, alerting developers to know that, hey, you know, we're not interested. We happen to do this in Georgia. I have a property down there. We're getting phone calls, people literally knocking on doors. We put those signs up there. Within 3 months, all that activity stopped. So it is effective. I have to say that it is.
Good to know. Okay, so we need to talk about a budget request. If we're going to be putting together a poster board with a map, that's going to cost something. We'll have, I mean, the poster board shouldn't cost that much. I'm thinking like no more than what, $20. We'll have printing costs. Does anybody have a sense of what it would cost to do color printing of a large map? You know, maybe we want like several inserts, like Esteban said, we drop a pin and we have an insert with like a blow up picture of John. Do you want to say?
Yeah, I have a large scale printer at my office. If it's, you know, not 40 sheets, I can print a map that's, you know, a good size, and we could get it mounted to some foam core or something.
Okay.
So that's an easy thing to. So the cost is zero.
Okay. I mean, I'm thinking one or what, like maybe not more than 2 poster boards. We
Okay.
just don't have bandwidth.
Yeah.
You know, maybe like 2x4 or something like that.
Okay, yeah, sure.
2x3.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Mhm.
Anybody else have any suggestions on that? And does anybody want to volunteer to help put together the graphic? Oh, wait, I see a hand being raised. Lori?
Hi, thank you. So, guys, I just want to thank you for inviting me to the group. This is stimulating, gives me a little bit of hope. I definitely, I'm interested. I hope that I can get this block to get interested as well. I can't do it by myself. And, I do have the PLG Cafe where if we needed to meet, I know Chris would let us. So keep me updated, Suki, and I'll see if I can keep talking to the block and see what I can, what I can do. I can't be the everything on a block with 45 houses. That's ridiculous, right?
Of course. And I just want to say very briefly before you go, obviously the way that we address your concern is through zoning and landmarking. And I think we've, said that before. But you're right, these are community processes. It cannot be just you that puts in a request. The landmarking requests need to come from the property owners. It needs to go through the Landmarks Commission. It does generally come for review before us. The zoning request, again, needs to start with the community board, and there are different types and ways of making these requests. But yeah, it is a community conversation, and you should know that you're not alone. Almost every block, has these concerns. So yeah, this is what we're here for, is to have that conversation. And I will say it's been a very bad environment for that with the Department of City Planning. I mean, you just heard what's coming down from the city, which is the opposite of what you want. But that being said, we're here for the community. That's our job. Okay, so back to the fair. Do we want to put in a request for a tablet or anything of that nature? Mia, does the office have that kind of supplies? Can we have like 1 or 2 tablets on hand?
Yeah, we have some iPads at the office that we can bring out.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So I don't think we might not need like a huge budget request, maybe like, $20, $30 to be safe. Does anyone want to volunteer to help design the map? Again, as Lori says, I can't do everything.
Right. Also, Suki, if it's just supplies to just do the drawing and whatever, those are things that we can order from the office.
Okay, so we might not need a special budget
Yeah,
request.
but we just need a layout of what it is that will be needed so that we're clear.
Okay. John?
So I can help lay out the map, but I think it would be good to have someone else involved, just so there's not, I don't know, the perception that this is being driven by vested interest somehow. I don't know.
Okay, I'll work with you.
Okay.
I'm happy to work with you.
Okay.
And thank you for the offer of help.
Sure.
I appreciate it. Okay, so one last thing. So if we're going to have any conversations about zoning, I do think it's really important. People have complained before that these topics are difficult to understand, they're boring, etc. But I think one of the reasons we're here is to try and engage the community more and educate them more, and help them to deal with these city agencies. Everyone is saying that we don't trust what's coming from the agencies. And I really think knowledge is power. Knowledge is the key. So we've talked about whether we need to do a zoning workshop for the public. as well as board members. There is a ULURP workshop coming up at the Borough President's Office for board members. But for the general public, so the board office has suggested that we could apply for funding to have zoning workshops over the summer, run by an organization that I can't remember what their name is now, but it used to be the Center for Urban Pedagogy. Some of you might be familiar with it. They produce a handbook on zoning, which is quite decent. Not perfect, but I think it's decent. And they would like to, they're offering to run workshops over the summer. I do remember several years ago, I attended workshops held by CUP. I think it was some Staten Island community board held them. And like, we kind of sat around in these little groups, like around boards, and they had like pieces on the board, and they were like trying to get people to like put the pieces in different places and stuff like that. So I don't know what these workshops would be like, whether they would allow us to, you know, kind of customize them or whatever, but that's a suggestion that we've gotten from the board office. And, you know, do we want to work with this group to hold workshops over the summer and apply for funding with them? What do people think? Alicia.
You know, Suki, this sounds like a rezoning proposal. This is how rezoning proposals begin. It begins with, first, we notify the community and we do a workshop in which we tell the community what the existing zoning is. And so we get a nonprofit to come into the neighborhood and we sit there and say, hey, this is the zoning. Understand what your zoning is. What would you like to see? What do you think is an issue here? This is a rezoning proposal. This is not something that you have gotten an agreement from this committee to do. So I ask that the residents in this committee decide whether or not we want to start a rezoning proposal in this community board when we have adamantly for the past decade have said no. This is the beginning of a rezoning proposal. This is how it works. Suki is very much aware of that, and yet she's now pushing for, just by herself and possibly with some help from John, to sit there and do a rezoning in this community, knowing that what's going to happen is the only thing that's going to happen to us is an upzoning, because we know there's nothing else that's going to come about it. So what does it matter whether the community knows what zoning they live in or what zoning they don't live in? That means absolutely nothing to the residents in this community. And yet you want to start a zoning process, a rezoning process, by doing the first step that is required by notifying the residents of where these rezoning, what their rezoning is. You can't, you're not doing this, Suki. You're not in this neighborhood. You're not doing it. I understand these are not your people. I understand that you do not come from this community. I understand that you don't really care about the residents in this community, but this is not going to happen. Understand that. We are not starting a rezoning process. And I'm saying it right now, very clear, so that you understand that.
So your vote is no on these workshops.
We will do everything that we can as a community group to stop any mention of a rezoning proposal, starting with, oh, community outreach with a nonprofit to start the process. We won't do it. No matter how you code it, no matter what, how you should code it, this is not gonna happen.
Okay.
We are not letting our residents in this community be displaced. Okay? It's not going to happen.
Okay. Thank you for your input. Nicola and then John.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the point of these workshops. Because again, we're in the midst of City of Yes, which is changing the zoning, changing everything about the city. Why are we stepping back to talk about basic zoning when the zoning is all changing? If anything, we want workshops that are talking about City of Yes and what's happening to their community, forward thinking, not just, we're not in a stable situation right now. Everything is changing with regards to zoning, and we're not trying to be rezoned. So I'm not really sure what these workshops would entail and why we would be bringing an outside third party to talk about basic zoning. Any one of us could talk about basic zoning right now. That's not our issue.
Okay, okay. That's a reasonable point. Okay, John?
I guess I was thinking about this in a more generous way, in that I think, Suki, you're right. Knowledge is power. I think, there are many of us on this this committee that have a good working knowledge of zoning, but I don't think everybody does. I think trying to share that knowledge is not a bad thing, but I could see why that's not a shared perception or a shared idea. So yeah, we're all allowed our opinions.
Okay, thank you. Felice?
Yes. I'm hearing all of these comments, and Alicia has made a valid one. We've been fighting against the developer there where the factory, the spice factory once stood, and they have put a new request in, and they're really waiting for this rezoning to take place because they don't have any regards or respect for the neighborhood nor the botanical gardens. They want to build up. They do not care about any green space or garden. Okay, so no, we need to be educated about the zoning. And actually, we don't need any zoning. We don't need any more zoning. We already have 3 buildings that was built around here that's up zone. For whom? We don't even have schools nor hospitals to supply the density of this population right now. Okay, so no, I'm not for the zoning. I really am not. I always stand, and I will continue to stand to protect the botanical gardens as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And I just want to let you guys know as well that the Spice Factory developer has requested to present before the community. And I've told them that until at least the draft environmental impact statement is complete, that they should not be, that's the right time for them to be presenting. But if somebody wants to hear from them before, if a lot of committee members want to hear from them before then, let me know. Does anybody have a comment on that? Alicia and then Nicola.
How does a chair just unilaterally decide to tell a developer that they cannot present in front of the land use committee? That should have been a discussion that was had with the land use committee before you responded back to them. This is supposed to be a community board and a community committee.
Okay.
Discuss.
So they've actually requested to present in March. So it's February now, and I'm asking the rest of you guys. Nicola?
Has anything changed with their proposal? Is it still the 17-story building? I know
As
they
far
wanted
as-
to upzone, right?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, nothing has changed yet. You know, we had that draft scope of work hearing over the summer, and since then, nothing new has been filed. The next milestone that they're supposed to complete is the draft environmental impact statement.
So what do they plan on presenting to us?
I don't
Just
know.
the,
I guess the current plan.
so does it make sense to at least have that conversation with them to see what they are presenting so that we have a solid understanding and they understand some of our concerns? In case they forgot?
I mean, I'm open to that. Yeah. What do other people think? Police? Police? Police, you're still on mute. You need to unmute.
It finally let me unmute. Yes. So I got the opportunity to sit with the Brooklyn Borough president. He said that they did put another application in. Okay. So I welcome to hear what they have to say, because they really want to upzone. They want to disregard the conservatory and the damages that it would do. They do not care. So why can't we hear what they have to say? Yes, I welcome that.
Okay, John?
I think the key thing about the timing, and I'm not quite sure where we are with the draft EIS or whatever milestones you mentioned, but we've got to meet with them before they get certification. Because once they're certified, it's like they're not changing anything. So that's, if the issue is to meet with them before or after that certification, it's got to be before.
Yeah, so you know, you tell me, John, but I don't think they can be certified until after they've completed the final EIS, right?
You know what? I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that that part of the process.
Which, as we learned with Green Fast Track, could be many, many months from now, because they're not even done with the draft EIS.
I think if they do have a clear idea of what the program is going to be, then and what the affordability is going to be, that seems like an appropriate time. If they haven't changed anything, if they don't have any adjustments, then I don't know what would be learned from that.
Okay. You know, I'm open to having them present now. Oh, Tom. Tom, you need to unmute.
Yes, I just did. I'm just suspicious and concerned that our meeting with them is not presented by them as our endorsement. Because they'll do anything they can to get that 17 stories, including claiming that we agree.
Yeah, so my recollection is a number of years ago, when we went through the charter revision, one of the things developers wanted was shorter ULURP timelines. And so what was suggested to them is that they come to the community during the certification process and meet with the community beforehand, you know, hash things out with us, present it to us, so that they could get that out of the way before starting ULURP, right? And this was presented as a win for the community because we would have more time to comment, but also a win for the developers because they could potentially shorten the ULURP timeline and shorten the certification process with city planning. So, you know, I definitely see what Tom is saying, that you know, potentially they're going to use this as a way to try and speed up the process and, you know, kind of get past us and say, oh, well, you know, we checked that box, we met with them. You know, so now city planning, approve our application as fast as possible, and let's move on to the public review. On the other hand, if there are community members who want to hear from them, I don't see why we can't do that. Alicia.
Okay, I got it. Just for clarity's sake, there's no requirement by the developers to come in front of the community. And we've seen developers skip that portion of it just at the last rezoning that we wind up challenging that we won by placing a lawsuit. So they don't have to come in front of us. That time period that it was not set in law, there was no law. The only requirement that the law had with the new 2019 charter revision was that they have to be able to, the city planning commission has to tell us that they have 30 days to certify the application. Okay, the idea of that 30 days window was not so the developer could come into our neighborhood and do a presentation, but to give us an opportunity to see the actual physical plans that the developer was having, and then be able to try to put pressure on our local city council person to make changes within that 30 days. The way that we use the 30 days is by filing the lawsuit, which then forced the Department of City Planning to come back and change its position. Instead of certifying the application with no visible effects, they came back and said, yes, there would be environmental effects to this development project. So that 30-day window was not used for for the advantage of the developer. It was actually used for the advantage of the community. So just by meeting with them, you don't necessarily say that you want it, but what it does, it allows us to see exactly what the plans are. Now, it's supposed to also be able to, this is supposed to be the negotiation part, right? This is the first time a developer that I know of that's actually coming in front of the community and sending their plans before the certified, because they know that they're going to have a problem in this neighborhood. They don't want another lawsuit. And we're willing to do one. And they know that. So now they're coming before us beforehand and saying, well, what can we negotiate with you guys? What changes can we make? And so I think this is an opportunity for us to look at what their plans are and push something forward. Especially because the Book of Botanic Gardens has already stated that the one that we have seen previously, will cause damage to the garden. So there's still potential damage. And so what they're trying to do now is they're trying to negotiate with us where they've never done that before. They've never done that before. And so we need to say, okay, well, let's look at this plan. Now, I'm not saying that we should negotiate with them, but I'm saying this is an opportunity for them to look at these plans, analyze these plans, and for us, from my group, to look at, do we want to file a lawsuit against this developer, because we will have 30 days to do so once this application gets certified. What do we see in this plan that is questionable, and that we might object to? Now, at the same time, the community can also look at it and say, well, what benefits do we want? And we want to see those benefits in writing. We don't want to see that, oh, we'll get back to you later. We want to see numbers in writing. We don't want to, oh, we're going to get back to you later. Because once you start doing that to us, we know a lawsuit is coming. So get your lawyers together, get your dollars together, make sure John tells those people that, get it together, because here it comes. Okay? That's my suggestion. My suggestion is give us an opportunity to look at it, see if there's any negotiation that could possibly happen, and let's see if we can get some hard numbers from them before this application is certified.
Okay. So Mia, it sounds like there are a number of people who would like to hear from the Spice Factory developer in March. So can we get back to them and let them know that they can be on the schedule for March? Mia? Mia?
Sorry, Suki, I was trying to unmute. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. So it sounds like there are a number of community members who would like to hear from the Spice Factory developer in March.
Okay.
So, you know, I'm happy to do that. And maybe we can get back to them and tell them that we would like them to present to the ULURP committee in March.
Okay, I'll connect with Dante in the morning and we'll get it together.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Also, can I suggest that the Book and Botanic Gardens be invited to that meeting specifically so they can also see the proposal? I think it's important that we spread this information and specifically target the Book and Botanic Gardens. So please come and hear what the developers have to say.
Okay, not a problem.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, does anybody else have any other items they want to raise? And Mia, I'll also follow up with you about the community fair after the meeting. Just, you know, put in writing that we want the poster boards and the iPads.
Understood. No problem.
Okay. And okay, just very quickly, so on the workshops issue, I told Dante, you know, I wasn't sure and I was going to ask the rest of the committee, but it sounds like there isn't a lot of enthusiasm for this. I mean, unless anybody else wants to speak up now on this issue. Anybody? Okay. So, you know, I guess the answer is no. Okay. Nicola?
I'm sorry, I got interrupted. What topic are you talking about?
The zoning workshops over the summer. It's run by this organization that I think they used to be CUP, but they're called something different now. You know, if this is not something the committee wants to support, then I'll just say no.
No, I'm not interested. Not in that.
Okay. All right. If there's no other business, can I get a motion to adjourn? Oh, John? John?
I was just agreeing to adjourn, giving a motion
Okay.
to adjourn.
Thank you. Anyone want a second? Rod? Okay. Not a committee
Thank you,
member,
Rod.
but yes. Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone.
All right, good night.
Good
Happy
night.
Valentine's Day.